Welcome to the first episode of Mission Hill. If you are unsure of what this is and want the full proper context, I recommend checking out episode 0. It is the first video uploaded to this channel and it explains everything in depth. Put very simply, it is a play-by-play analysis of each episode of the show Mission Hill, going in order, with the occasional fun fact and anecdote sprinkled in as well as a few clips from the show. I don't want to waste any more of your time, so thank you for clicking on this video, and here we go. Starting at the beginning, we have our pilot episode. We open up on our main character, Andy French, as you can tell by his name tag, asking his boss Ron if he can leave work early for the day to visit his family who lives outside of the city. Andy is a 24-year-old guy who lives in Mission Hill, sharing an apartment with 2 roommates who we'll get to momentarily. He's the kind of guy who has a lot more faith in himself than the people around him do. He's a struggling cartoonist, he works in a waterbed store, and generally has blue hair but can be seen with black hair. And he is voiced by Wallace Langham, by the way. Throughout most of the series, we see him act pretty sleazy and douchey, with a few brief moments of compassion sprinkled in. Had the show aired for more than 13 episodes, I think we would have seen a lot more character development. His boss Ron quickly shuts him down, explaining that everyone who's working in the store that day would be staying to do inventory that night, telling everyone he has a hot date with big phony jugs, which are the kind he likes. Ron is your typical sleazy small business owner. He sounds Eastern European to me and reminds me a lot of Roman from Grand Theft Auto 4, but he does seem to be ethnically ambiguous on purpose. Ron heads into the bathroom and Gwen, one of Andy's coworkers, comes up beside him, complaining about the sudden store-wide shift change. This, of course, prompts Andy to get behind the wheel of a forklift and use it to stack several heavy office-style desks in front of the bathroom door, trapping Ron inside.
Okay, everybody, work's over, and nobody saw anything, right?
Right!
From my best judgment, this is false imprisonment, which in the state of California would lead up to about 3 years in prison. This is absolutely illegal and pretty immoral, but unfortunately for Ron, the plot had to move along that day. Now heading home for the day, Andy starts making some uninteresting small talk and Gwen outright asks him on a date. He excitedly agrees, inviting her to a house party he's having that weekend. After this, they go their separate ways, Andy walking home with a shit-eating grin on his face, which literally leads into a nothing can get me down walking montage with the music and everything. Entering his apartment building and thus the next scene, Andy comes across several of his neighbors who we meet for the first time. The first 2 of which are Natalie, seen here holding groceries, and her baby, literally named Baby Nameless. The reason for this name is that she and her husband Carlos want to make sure that they pick a name that will have proper cultural significance moving into the future. Natalie is a professor of women's studies for a local college in Mission Hill and is thus very aware of and tuned into culture, others' perspectives, sociology, that kind of stuff. She clearly has her hands full, so Andy offers to help her carry her groceries inside. She begins complaining about how exhausted she and Carlos have been, not only due to their new baby, but because of the excess of noise heard in their apartment at night. The elevator doors finally open, and we meet the source of that noise, which is another couple that lives in the building, whose names are Gus and Wally. They admit they had been arguing the night before, but have obviously made up by the time Andy was getting home the next day. Gus and Wally are obviously a gay couple, which was pretty progressive to see in 1999 when the show first aired, especially when you consider that they aren't made out to be some sort of anomaly or boiled down just to be the butt of a joke. They get a lot of respect in this show, they're treated with a lot of depth, and we see more and more of that throughout the episodes, and especially in the finale. As they exit the apartment building, Wally apologizes for the noise caused the night before and lightly brings up the argument again, to which Gus shuts that down pretty quick. Immediately following this interaction, we see Andy, now in his apartment, grabbing a beer from his fridge and calling out for his roommates, Posey and Jim. We'll meet Posey in a few moments, but we do get to meet Jim once Andy coaxes him out of his room, from which he was blaring some mid-tempo electronic music. Jim looks like this and has a very distinctive voice and personality, and he is voiced by Brian Posehn, who I personally recognize as Bert from The Big Bang Theory. He may be the most relaxed, chill guy I have ever seen in a cartoon. Andy asks Jim to give him a ride to his parents' house so he can have dinner and pick up his family dog named Stogie. Jim agrees and reminisces about the dog, which implies that these two have been friends likely since childhood. By the way, you are not alone if you find the layout of the stairs leading to such a high bedroom with no guardrail a little dangerous. Thankfully, Jim puts that fear to rest, however, with this next move.
I'll get the keys. Ow!
The next scene involves Andy and Jim riding in the car on the way to Andy's parents' house, where we find out that his parents and little brother Kevin will be moving to Wyoming. Andy claims that this is 1,000 miles away, which helps support the idea that Mission Hill is geographically located where San Francisco actually is. We also find out that Andy describes Kevin as a giant nerd, claiming that he got a shirt made with his SAT score on it, although Andy is a little jealous as Kevin's score is higher than his own. Following this, we find ourselves in the French home where we meet Andy's parents, whose names never go beyond Mom and Dad. The dad character explains to Jim the Wild West nature of direct mail marketing, which Jim appears to be genuinely engaged in, and the mom is serving everybody frozen TV-style dinners, clearly bringing out the best in dining for their family, especially considering we simultaneously meet Kevin and have the bombshell drop on Andy that Kevin is going to be coming to live with him, and he pretty much has no say in the matter. Andy is pretty hesitant towards this idea, being pretty audibly upset with the situation, for which he receives a lashing out from his mom. I've been there before. He pretty much agrees to the idea when he realizes that there's not another option. Part of this is because his parents are moving to Wyoming, which they explain Kevin isn't a fan of at all, and yet they're going to do it anyway. I'll be the first to tell you that Andy can be a brat and have kind of a shitty attitude and personality throughout the series, and the parents' behavior here really puts those pieces together. Among their first interaction, we see that Andy is immediately hostile towards Kevin for rolling over his foot with his big-ass suitcase, and Kevin is basically just a whining bitch, tattling on Andy to his mom for saying the word crap. Now's a good time to mention that Kevin is voiced by Scott Menville, who has done too many voices to count, providing here a pretty typical nerdy sort of delivery. The boys end up tussling it out like brothers inevitably do before getting in the car and heading back to Mission Hill. In the car ride back to the apartment, Kevin begins talking about his excitement for the city and his desire to be open to different kinds of culture, which immediately initiates another slapping fight between the two brothers. This time, Jim has to put an end to the fighting, if not inadvertently.
All right, you two. I'm gonna pull this car over right now. What? Don't let me stop your arguing.
By the way, you could maybe debate the specifics of the guidelines, but I'm going to label this as indecent exposure, which is another 6 months in jail. I neglected to mention the dog in his first appearance, but I wanted to save that for this next scene, where we also meet the roommate mentioned before named Posey. Posey looks like this and is a very spaced out, hippie, spiritual kind of person, with a voice that matches her looks very well. She is voiced by Vicki Lewis, who has also done too many voices to name. Kevin tries to introduce himself as a gentleman because he's nervous about living with a girl for the first time, but she assures him that he has a good aura, which is in contrast to Stogie, who has quote-unquote dark forces at work within him. Throughout the series, Stogie consistently acts like a raving lunatic and is always chewing stuff up, be it plants, furniture, whatever. From here on out, if you see him, he's probably getting into some shit. I know this is a lot of introductions, and I do still have a few more to do in this episode, as well as a few more in the episodes as we go along, so I appreciate you bearing with me. The next set of scenes establishes Kevin's experience at his new high school for the first time, where it becomes immediately clear that he is not going to quite fit in. After being asked to check in somebody's pants to find room 410, Kevin is approached by one of two of his recurring friends, Toby, who is voiced by Josh Weinstein, one half of the main duo that created the show. Toby shows him to room 410 and to meet the other recurring friend of Kevin's, whose name is George, voiced by Bill Oakley, who is the other half of the main duo that created the show. Toby is basically a typical nervous, heavy-set nerd kind of character, while George is a more monotone, matter-of-factual kind of guy. I do seem to recall him getting kind of angry in some of the future episodes. While Kevin and George have a conversation about their preferences and geolocation for their respective fake girlfriends, and Toby has a meltdown over not having a girlfriend at all, the teacher busts in and demands that Kevin give an introduction about himself, to the other students' chagrin. After observing the other students' clear lack of paying attention, the teacher drops this gem.
Okay. Since you all paid such close attention to that presentation, I'm sure you won't mind taking a quiz on it. Take out a piece of paper. Question 1. What is the new student's name?
Once he gets home from school, we get a quick scene of Kevin instigating a fight with Andy over him drinking a beer despite him being 24 years old. The first episode so far makes it kind of hard to root for Kevin, even when considering how arrogant and douchey Andy comes off in retrospect. But by the end of this series, I found myself rooting for both of these two, and I think you will as well. The following day, we get a scene of Kevin coming home from the grocery store, bumping into Andy and Jim, which Andy did not want. The reason for this is that they were headed to a club called Backwash to see a ska band called Silly Rabbit, and he didn't want Kevin to tag along. Jim welcomes Kevin to go before Andy can stop him, to which Kevin happily agrees. I did go online and try to see if there was a ska band called Silly Rabbit. I didn't have any luck, but I did find several other amateur acts with the name, mostly different genres of rock. We also find in this scene that Kevin is a big fan of Gordon Lightfoot, which comes up again several times in the series, as well as Scott Joplin and the Beatles. Kevin brings this up as he mentions that he's never heard ska before. I'm basically a lifelong Beatles fan, but I did have to freshen up on my Scott Joplin and Gordon Lightfoot. But I'm going to give Kevin the benefit of the doubt here and say that despite his normal taste being a little more mellow than ska, I do think it's eccentric enough that he would give it a fair shake at least. Well, that would have been the case, but Kevin realizes that the club is a 21 plus only venue, which freaks him out, causing him to have such a large meltdown that a bouncer comes over, notices how young he is, and calmly tells him he has to leave. No harm, no foul. However, Kevin starts wailing and screaming about how he can't afford to go to jail and can't compromise his opportunity to get into college. This aggravates Andy, which causes him to start brawling with Kevin for the third time this episode, resulting in Andy being physically thrown out and Kevin calmly leaving the club. By the way, I'm not going to count them fighting as any sort of illegal activity, as they are brothers, and it would be very unlikely for them to get into a legal dispute over the matter. Them fighting is supposed to represent siblings roughhousing, but it's not supposed to represent actual assault. Once outside, Kevin tries to justify his freak out, and Andy scolds him for standing in his own way and not having fun with the opportunities presented to him. Kevin feels bad for a second and agrees with him, proclaiming that he will begin having fun. If you've seen the show, you know that there's a joke here. I'm going to purposefully avoid saying it, but hopefully me mentioning it incentivizes you to check out the show yourself. The following morning, we find both Andy and Kevin looking disheveled in their underpants, encountering Posey, who claims that Kevin's inner light has now dimmed and is matching that of Andy's. Kevin claimed to be up all night researching how to be cool online to no avail, which is clearly implied to be unlike him. Later that day, Andy is laying next to Gwen schmoozing it up on the clock when he receives a call on the work phone, finding out that Kevin has gotten in trouble at school. We also see here that Ron hates personal calls. We cut to Andy walking into the principal's office to find Kevin dressed like this. The principal begins explaining that Kevin was sleeping during class and when awoken, began lashing out and calling the teacher a douchebag. A word so disgusting that the principal refuses to say it. She writes it down very neatly, which is pointed out by Andy, showing that he's not taking the situation very seriously. After threatening to call their parents, Andy gives the principal a half-hearted vow to punish Kevin for his behavior. Instead of punishing Kevin like Andy promises the principal, he instead takes him to a discount grocery store to help him carry his beer home. The name of the store is the Discount Food Hobo. It is not real and I did check, but I do wish that it was. They specialize in discount grub, cheap hooch, and gourmet cheeses. While at the store, Kevin decides to embrace his new lifestyle and ask Andy to buy him his first beer. As a result, we get this line from Andy.
You're pretty serious about this new attitude, huh?
Yes.
Excellent. Because I was afraid you'd wuss out. But drinking shows a real commitment to becoming a cooler person.
He has a hard time determining which bottle on the shelf is actually beer, so Andy recommends his own personal first beer called Gruberhoff. A couple of anecdotes. It is debatable how illegal it is for Andy to give Kevin alcohol, as he is family, and ends up giving it to him in his own home. We'll leave that charge ambiguous for now. Secondly, Gruberhoff is not a real beer company, which is no surprise, but I did want to point out how sketchy the packaging looks. Gruberhoff sounded German to me, so I did a little research into the branding for other German beers, and it appears that this is a sort of parody that lacks any intricacy or beauty in the art like it typically would actually have. After this, though, we arrive at the house party. It's quite crowded by the look of things, featuring several characters we either never see again or only see as background characters. We get a quick scene of Kevin's friends, Toby and George, stopping by. Kevin offers them each a beer, but they decline as it would only get in the way of them playing the Babylon 5 card game. Some of these adult cartoons, like Mission Hill, King of the Hill, other ones I'm sure, have this fixation on making fun of Babylon 5. Just wanted to point that out. We get a quick scene of Andy coercing Gwen to his bedroom right before Kevin drunkenly has an interaction with a stranger who is raiding their fridge.
Hey, man, lay off the Gruberhoff. That's my private reserve.
Who the hell are you?
I'm the Grubermeister, and that's all you need to know.
As the scene progresses, we see Kevin progressively making an ass out of himself, trying to hook up with random women at the party. He does end up dancing around, getting everybody's attention, and recognize that the music being played at the party is ska, which, unless he had researched that, between getting kicked out of the club and the party the following evening, could be a plot hole. However, this would be in character for Kevin. Meanwhile, back at the intercourse timeline, we somewhat confusingly see Andy and Gwen begin making out and shutting their curtain. Then we get several scenes of Kevin acting out. Then we cut back to Andy, who is only now getting undressed as the light of dawn appears to be coming through the window. So this implies that some time has passed since they first went into the bedroom. I'm not sure why he's only now getting undressed. It's a little confusing. Either way, he hears Kevin outside of his window, struggling on the ground, and feels compelled to check on him, despite Gwen having other plans. He opens the door and sees that Kevin has a potted plant shoved in the front of his pants.
Geiger.
What's he saying?
He's saying he's the Grubermeister. Do any of you have a problem with that?
No,
Sir.
absolutely not at all.
Good.
We see that only 4 people are left at the party, and morning light seems to be coming through the big window. Andy kicks them out, as you hopefully saw, and helps nurse Kevin back to reality, on into the daylight hours, hanging out in the bathroom with him, as he presumably pukes up the night before. They end up joined by Gwen, who brings Andy coffee, and quickly leaves after Stogie enters the room, coughing up several coins, cigarette butts, and bottle caps that he swallowed off screen during the party, according to Jim. I could possibly add endangerment to pets to the list of crimes, but I'm not sure that Stogie would be safe in any environment that you put him in, so I am going to give them a pass on this one. The episode ends with Kevin proclaiming that he realizes that his quest to be cool was definitely too hard for him. It's a way of life that he doesn't truly align with, and he apologizes for his behavior. Very grown up. For the first time in this episode, Andy suggests something truly mature and almost wise if you want to go that far, telling Kevin he'd be better off being himself. The episode's title comes into play when Andy assures Kevin that his quote-unquote douchebag aspect can and will be tolerated, resulting in an actually sweet moment. Kevin then laments on the previous night and expresses relief that his mom and dad would never find out about his behavior. Of course, the show abruptly cuts to the parents' answering machine, on which Kevin left this message.
Yo, dudes! It's Kevin! Hey, could you send me my birth certificate? Because I want to change my name to the Grubermeister!
After that, the credits roll and we conclude our first episode. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you enjoyed, leave a comment down there, leave me a like, subscribe, do all the fun stuff. I am looking forward to continuing this series, and here's to episode 2. Thank you again.